Good afternoon and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio online Lunchtime Talk. These are live every Friday at 1 p.m, beaming out onto your smartphones, laptops, iPads and even living room televisions. My name's Luke and I am the Pervasive Media Studio producer. These talks are our chance to throw open the digital doors of the Pervasive Media Studio and for you to hear more from the people who are part of our community or who are working on things that excite us. And especially big welcome to any of you out there who are new to the studio, for whom this might be the first time you're engaging with what we do. For all of those of you, here's a little bit more info on what the studio does. The studio is a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology with everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. We're a partnership between Watershed, University of the West of England and the University of Bristol. And we're a home for early stage ideas, companies and creatives and a meeting place of both the creative and commercial industries. We are a studio space with desks, meeting rooms, events and opportunities all for free for our residents. And ultimately, we're a safe place for artists to take risks in their practice and make time for collaboration. This week's talk is the beginning of a series of talks as part of our Future Themes season. Recently, the studio funded several residents and their collaborators to convene deep conversations about art, technology and society, conversations that are both hopeful and critically engaged. Full details of all the other Future Themes projects that will be featured in that season of talks will be live on our website after this talk. From now until early December, these talks will focus on what's emerged from those conversations. And we kick off this week with a talk by the new collective Across the Room, which is comprised of collaborators Imwen, Camille Aubry, Takita Bartlet, and Will Taylor. Motivated by the idea that we should all take a more intentional look at what we're creating and how, the team are interrogating new ways of developing digital facilitation tools that can be applied to virtual spaces, live events, training simulations, and entertainment solutions, and exploring inclusively designed, immersive, interactive experiences that appeal to new customer markets that the mainstream does not capture. There'll be a Q&A at the end with the talk running roughly 35 minutes long. If you want to ask any questions, just pop them into the chat window and we'll pick them out to ask the speakers as we go. Or if you like, you can tweet us at PM Studio UK with any questions or comments you've got. A captioned and recorded version of this talk will be available here after the talk is finished. Before we start, next week's talk is called Rabbit Holes and is by Ian Forrester, Penny Hay and James Cook. And they're going to talk about adaptive podcasting, what it is and how it might shape the future of listening. They'll explain the technology and talk about some of the creative challenges it offers. And they'll talk about a specific project they're working on to connect young audiences to the natural world. You can get news on all our future talks by following us on @PM Studio UK on Twitter or @Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or by subscribing to our newsletter on our website. If you want the easy way to do it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel right now by clicking the button below the screen and give the video a thumbs up. You'll be able to stay in touch with all of our talks, and the more subscribers we get, the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. Please feel free to share the link now on any of your socials. We are live and we'd love to have as many people as possible join us. And for now, I'm going to hand over to Across the Room.
Have you ever entered a space and felt unwelcome? I think it's happened to all of us. Because we often use words like inclusion, diversity, and we talk about marginalized and hard to reach audiences. But let's really think about those words and why those audiences aren't really in our spaces. So my name's Imwen, and I'm part of the Across the Room collective. I'm an experienced designer and social games maker. So essentially, I create spaces for adults to play, explore topics, have conversations, get some respite, and hopefully have some fun. And I'm really interested in how we use technology to make those audiences active in their experiences rather than passive viewers. And a lot of my work is about centering Black voices and Black frames of reference within narratives that already exist. And to do this, it involves looking at removing this creator-audience hierarchy and empowering audiences to really explore and examine their own social environments. And a lot of that is about cultural relevance and how to bring it to physical and virtual spaces. Because really, cultural relevance is often the reason why particular audiences are missing. So for myself, as an artist working in emerging technologies, I'm often asked to describe the what of my projects. What is the device? What will I do with it? What platform will it be on? But very rarely does the question start with why. And for me, I think that when we start with why, we're able to move beyond the technology to what truly matters. So when the opportunity came up with Pervasive Media Studios to apply for some funds to research, in this current climate, it made sense to take a deeper look at how we're having conversations and how we could think about using technology to facilitate those conversations. So my background is that I come from a practice that involves co-constructed models developed throughout my life experience. I come from a tradition of experimental and left field approaches to creating work. And I believe the project should be collaborative. And I have a very healthy, I think healthy, skepticism towards these default solutions for participation. I've worked in production for experimental and groundbreaking and award-winning companies such as Punch Drunk and Shunt, in communities as the co-director of the BritBox, an arts organisation where we place the arts in an indoor working market with this idea of taking it out of institutions and placing it in everyday working spaces. And that was about giving access to people and people the access to us as curators and facilitators, but also giving them permission to curate and make work themselves. Also in communities as the co-director of We Love Brixton, and that was really about creating vehicles of collaboration that were for artists, performers, the general public and local business in projects that added value for all. Because, you know, we have to be honest, value means different things to different people. A common thread of in my work at that point was that I didn't see enough people that looked like me creating work. And I also didn't recognize people that I knew in the stories. So it was at that point I decided to become an artist and create my own stories. So I've had residencies with Blast Theory, with Bryony Cummings, B3 Media's Talent Lab, Surumadura in Sri Lanka. I'm also a Lift Tottenham artist, London International Festival of Theatre. I've just finished a 5-year project which was about delivering an alternative performance education to young people outside of the curriculum. And I had the pleasure of working with the same group of young people for the duration of their secondary school life. Our game, Balthazar's Treasure, which was inspired by the real life story of Balthazar Sanchez, who was a 16th century Moor who lived in Tottenham and was very rich, was to debut in the Lift Festival 2020. And it was devised to bring audiences to Tottenham to explore its rich history. I'm currently on a residential research programme with the University of the Underground. They're a pluralistic, transnational free university in Amsterdam, but the programme is online. It's called New Politics and Afrofuturism, and the focus is how to radically reframe our institutions. My other projects are Heroes, Villains and History and Black Rooms, an experience that reconceives what it means to have a political conversation using artistic, digital and cultural means, and it's framed by a Black British lens, because those are my eyes. And I'm pleased to say that's being produced by Scanners Inc., which is Kate Scanlon. Get to know her work because she's great. I'm also the co-founder and co-director of a new arts and cultural centre being built in South East London. It's called the Livesey Exchange and it's led by PEM people, and the build is due to start in 2021. But that is enough about me. On to Cam.
Hello everyone, my name is Camille Aubry. I'm a live illustrator and a cartoonist. I'm originally from France and I'm now based in Bristol. Over 10 years ago, I completed an architecture degree in Paris, specializing in scenography and set design. And I then came to the UK to study on a MA in illustration at Camberwell College of Arts. Today, aside from editorial illustrations and cartoons, I work as a live illustrator for academic, cultural and industry events. You might also have heard the word scribing or sketchnoting or graphic facilitation, but I personally prefer using the word live illustration to describe what I do. It means, for example, that I will record what is happening during an event with drawings in real time, or that I'll draw live to music during a concert. And I do so in physical and virtual spaces. So my live illustrations are projected, streamed online, up on a wall, as well as made accessible as hand-drawn paper-based artifacts. With the current health crisis, however, it almost exclusively means live illustrating remotely during Zoom events or meetings, or drawing live to music on YouTube. Organizations I have live illustrated for include the University of Bristol, the French Institute in London, the NHS, the Southwest Creative Technology Network, Calais, and University of West England. In December 2019, I became a resident of the Pervasive Media Studio, where I'm exploring ways to enhance my live illustration practice with the help of creative technologies. The idea being here to research ways of creating interactive environments and set designs with live illustrations. Currently, the live illustration practice is mostly known as an add-on to the corporate facilitation realm. And I really feel that there is an underexplored potential in how it can bring magic to environments that are often deemed, exclusive or expensive, by shifting power dynamics through audience immersion. And this is really why I'm part of Across the Room, because I'm really interested in researching ways of creating multivocal and audience-driven graphic facilitation experiences that amplify all voices. And this is key for us, starting with Black voices, and most importantly, to do it right. And I'm also part of Across the Room because I really believe that it can transform my practice and help me prove that further than just a drawing style, it's an artistic practice in its own right with its own potential developments. And now we're gonna introduce Takita, who unfortunately couldn't be here today in person, but made a video for us.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Takita. I am the creative technologist for the Across the Room collective. I came about this work through Imwen. We had worked together on one of her events, which was all about gathering a bunch of women to come along and have fun with technology, get creative with technology themselves, and drink wine whilst doing it. So I really enjoyed that. If I remember correctly, we had a lot of fun. So when Imwen reached out about this project, I was more than happy to get involved and to join in. My background is quite vast and varied. So academically, I'm a mathematician. However, I've worked in tech and in fashion and in education, and I particularly love to work at that intersection of the arts and the sciences. I find that working across both of those areas, I'm able to tap into the technical and creative qualities of both of them, and I love to just kind of combine that and apply that to various areas of various industries and all sorts of work. So again, that's partly why this project fits so nicely into what I love to do. In working at that intersection, my career has been quite varied and has spanned everywhere from designing and creating clothing and jewelry for the likes of Ellie Goulding, all the way to designing and implementing digital solutions for local government. So it really has been vast, but I've enjoyed all of it, which is what counts. Most recently, I've done quite a lot of work with young people for the past, at least 7 years or so. I've taught thousands of young people coding, which has been really cool, really fun. And for the past 2.5 years, I have been, I set up and run my social enterprise STEM in Style, which is all about getting young people engaged in science, technology, engineering, and maths, but through fashion and design. So really allowing them to apply the STEM skills they may or may not have been exposed to in the classroom, and showing them how those skills are applied to the fashion and design and creative industries as a whole, to be honest. So that's been some really enjoyable work. We do all sorts of workshops and projects with them covering wearable technology, fashion technology, 3D design, maths, jewelry making. We have a lot of fun with the STEM skills and allow them to get creative and also see the impact of the creative industries on the STEM industries as well. So exposing them to that overlap of the arts and sciences. I'm also doing that through some lecturing that I'm currently doing as well at London Met University. And I am also creating clothing and jewelry pieces that are used as educational tools as well, particularly for maths. So yeah, that's a bit about me. That's a quick overview of what I do and how I am involved in the project. So on to the next person.
Hey everyone, my name is Will Taylor, and I am part of the team in a more so like production capacity, effectively. When Imwen got in touch with me and mentioned the fact that the Across the Room team were looking to explore what it meant to ethno augment social realities, it really struck a chord with me. And it really developed and built on a whole load of research I've been doing as part of the digital placemaking Pathfinder, hosted at the PM Studio as part of the Bristol and Bath Creative Clusters program. All of my research was focused and centered around belonging and behavioral patterns and social policing and how that affects our experiences, especially as ethnic minorities, but at large, how it affects our experiences in cultural spaces, and also how we can figure out ways to effectively use digital interaction and our experiences in the digital space to inform our experiences in physical spaces and vice versa. So naturally joining this project was as a natural development of the work that I spent the last year and a half doing. Outside of being part of the Across the Rooms team, I co-lead on Rising Arts Agency's flagship program at the moment called Be It, which is a critical exploration of leadership, specifically in the creative and cultural sector, but more widely in society as well. And the methods we're using are very non-traditional, quite radical, and all effectively rest in that space of participatory and action research. Alongside that, I work in audio predominantly, having most recently hosted, produced, and developed the Residence podcast for the PM Studio, which you can find on the PM Studio website, alongside a series, developing a series of short dramas as well called Black Boys Cry, looking at masculinity and Blackness specifically. But as I mentioned before, I'm part of the Across the Room team in a capacity of really capturing and holding a lot of the critical thinking and the exploration. The beautiful thing about this project is Takita, Camille, and Imwen are all really deep in their creative practice in this space. So what that allows me to do is really catch the thinking and understand ways in which we can embed the development and the learning we've gone through and apply it into the rest of the project, and also understand how it can inform the other projects that we hope to work on together, but specifically in the realm of ethno augmenting realities. I joined the project at the first stage. So the project works in 4 stages, and we will go on to share that with you. But I joined the project in the first stage, which is council, which is specifically looking at the experiences ethnic minorities have in digital spaces and centering their understanding of what it means to participate in these sort of conversations. Council process is all about centering the audience and the participants as the experts and really forcing us to lean into and really appreciate the fact that they are the people with the knowledge, and we are trying to understand what it means to build processes around their experiences to ensure safety. I want to hand over to Imwen to build on that.
Imwen, you're on mute. It had to happen.
Of course it had to happen. There you go, I'm a human being. So I start again. Multivocality, which is about multiple voices, is rooted in this idea that we invite everyone into a participatory space of intercultural dialogue and think about how we can all have a conversation, but also how to have everyone in the room comfortable enough to be themselves. at the moment, Black audiences don't want to be in these shared spaces because they can be fraught due to the dynamics of structural racism, neo-colonial narratives, and institutionally embedded bias. And for me, selfishly, I don't want to make work for two separate audiences. A lot of the work that I make is about centering Black voices, but everybody is welcome to come. But in taking this approach, I understand that I need to make my spaces safe, and how to address nuance and creativity is something that really needs to be understood. So for us as Across the Room, multivocality, our focus sessions, have to be informed by our council sessions. And that includes understanding boundaries and respect, because that's crucial to making multivocality work. The information gained from our council sessions will assist us in considering what techniques and materials are needed to support working with intercultural audiences, and how we can acknowledge in those sessions that we're working with vulnerability. The multivocality sessions themselves will really allow us as researchers to understand the dynamics between intercultural audiences, and it will help us to ensure that the technology that we're going to develop in the future will assist in building those safe spaces. And I'm going to say this for everybody at Pervasive Media Studios, and maybe people listening too. As researchers or conveners of spaces, we need to make sure that we are making our spaces safe for participants. And we need to understand that this type of work is really important, and the care that we take now will carry us all forward. So thank you for listening. On to Will.
Yes, thank you, Imwen. So the next stage in the project is Interactivity, which is where effectively Takita's work and Camille's work sort of intersect, and they really meet each other in trying to effectively ensure that the participants in every stage of the process remain active, co-imagining ideas for innovative solutions in virtual spaces, and to animate these conversations through exploration. Pass over to Camille.
Thanks, Will. At this stage, I think the PM team is going to share a link in the YouTube live chat, which if you click on it, is going to take you to a gallery of extracts of live illustration made during the two discussions that we had in the project. So we've proposed to include live illustration in our discussions because of its interactive aspect, which we believe can play a major role in social tech. If we think about it, the live illustration practice is really the incarnation of active listening, a process that is, or at least should be, audience-driven. For example, when illustrating live, I listen and then I draw. And both the happening and the audience drives the illustration process. And in turn, the visuals influence people's thinking process. So it's almost really like a creative democratic cycle that is really craving further exploration, because graphics open doors to limitless explorations, right? There is nothing that we can't represent with illustrations. They have the power to demystify subjects deemed complicated, emotional, expensive, but for the exact same reasons, illustration can be very harmful, and in our case, extremely counterproductive. And we'll explore this a bit later in the talk. For now, I'm going to talk about the last phase of the project, which we've called Trace, and really was born out of one question. After the discussion takes place, what happens? With live illustrations, there is a trace, and in the corporate world, the visuals created live are often redeveloped as, let's say, marketing materials. And we believe that it can be so much more than a nice visual on Instagram. And we want to find out how they can keep the momentum going, you know, and support the ripple effects after discussions take place. So now we're going to tell you a little bit more about the story so far of the project.
Okay. This is me, right? Okay, so where we are so far, we haven't actually started our multivocality sessions yet, but the answers and information I think from our council sessions will really help to drive this interrogation forward. So initially we invited a small Black audience in their 30s, 40s and 50s to our council sessions. And the reason for that is because I'm aware often in tech spaces, testing happens with young people, with 18 to 30s, but really I wanted to get a different frame of reference. Our approach to our sessions wasn't about self, so it wasn't about pretending who we are and what we're doing. It was about discovering the barriers and understanding the participants' needs. So the Across the Room team's mantra was, we are the students and the audience are the experts, and we want to hear from them. Because we were the students, the audience had this information that we want to know, that we want to learn, so we were definitely the students. And our job was to come with a sense of openness to the unknown and to hold our assumptions. And that meant we needed to listen and also to be willing to let go of control and to understand that the possibility was that the answers would emerge from places that were not expected. But to know that they might be answers to crucial questions that were present but not yet voiced. So it was really about surrendering authorship and holding our ground, and which actually isn't that easy. So in our first session, we noticed that audiences are used to entering spaces that have certain hierarchies and dynamics. And when that's removed, some struggle because they're used to a recognized framework. So we as researchers recognized that we needed to be more explicit in the how and in the why. And at times we also needed to hold space tighter. I think one of the comments we joked about was read the room. And it's so true. The biggest learning for me was almost clear immediately before we started the council sessions. And that was that we weren't going to be able to deliver this project in the initial timeframe that we'd suggested, because we needed more time to interrogate our actual process. And I think the word that we came up with as a group was #slow inclusion, because the reality is that doing things this way, this process needs time. And if we, as Across the Room, want to create a radical new process whose foundations are firmly rooted in this idea of exchange rather than an extractive approach, more time was needed. Would you like to take over, Camille?
Yes, yeah, thank you. And actually the first discussion really highlighted everything that is wrong with live illustration as it is currently performed. So whilst the participants feel acknowledged in seeing their thoughts being amplified with drawings, their involvement in the process is currently way too limited. You know, the canvas that we use for recording the discussion with graphics is basically colonized even before the conversation starts. We have chosen the format, the palette, the brushes, and whilst our experience as creatives is valid here, we also recognize how it can be invasive. During the discussion as well, the access to the live illustration canvas is managed by us. We've got the finger on the pulse, deciding when to share it or not. And the audience doesn't really have a choice in when and how they can see it. So we're just questioning, how can live illustration be efficiently disruptive? Because it is disruptive. How can we keep this data visualization in real time audience driven? And how, as facilitators, to inject digital creativity when we want the audience to trigger the experience. And that's why allowing people to include themselves in the different elements of the conversation is something that we explore intently. I'm going to hand over to Will.
Thanks, Camille. I mean, from my perspective, getting to work with Camille, Takita and Imwen was really, really fascinating, like I said, because it built on a lot of research that I'd done before. And a lot of my research was looking at how to develop these kind of processes. And I was very quietly, admittedly, admiring Imwen's work from afar, because I could see that I was sort of like at the beginning of this journey and trying to really explore this stuff. What was really, really fascinating was hearing Imwen when we had our initial conversations express the fact that I'm not we're just not going to have enough time to deliver the entire thing. And then stepping into the first council session, I was quite fortunate to have participated as both a participant and in a production role. So stepping into the first council session and recognizing that, oh, yeah, we are not getting the information we need. And what that meant as being part of the team and understanding that we really had to unlearn effectively the colonial and traditional extractive methods that are used in these type of spaces, and what it meant to actually concede, surrender, and accept the fact that the time was being used, the quality of time was being used to create something that we couldn't necessarily measure, and the metrics we had available to us so far. And those metrics would then show themselves later on in the type of engagement that the participants would then go on to show. I am now going to try and sum up some of the learning that Takita found from the council sessions too. Takita's reflections in our reflection session were really, really informative as well about the power balance and what it actually means to really, really practice the belief and the idea of decolonizing these spaces. So I'll do my best, Takita. I hope I do you proud. In Takita's words, this is such a unique approach to my experience of design within tech. Not knowing how the end product will take shape and letting the entire process be molded by the audience and users is liberating. Ones and zeros are not the problem, it's what we build with them. We've had principles such as design thinking, human-centered design principles, user experience strategies, AI, machine learning, agile, Scrum implementation, but they're all fundamentally flawed through a lack of diverse, accessible, authentic, and collective human-led contribution at the inception, more importantly. What we create now leaves a legacy that challenges tech from a design and user perspective, and curates spaces both virtual and physical that thrive on a combination of these perspectives. It feels like we're crafting a couture piece of technology. Across the room is the open design house, providing a fully equipped safe space for our skilled audience to collaborate, contribute, and apply their craftsmanship in terms of their knowledge and experience. The care and attention to detail is encompassed into every element, from the fabric to the construction. Every thread counts and has purpose, and results in a one-of-a-kind product. In our case, that seamlessly is rich in its detail, authentic and deliberate, but powerful in its collaborative delivery of a story or message. It culminates in a beautifully curated experience that we can move in confidently and comfortably and with honor. And I think it speaks, Takita's reflections speak a lot to our relationship in terms of exploring creative tech as tools and aids, and what more we can learn from exploring the different entry points into what it means to be devising tools for communities at large, but especially when you try to refine and hone in onto the experiences that predominantly underrepresented communities are having when it comes to spaces in creative tech, and what it means to have those experiences sort of like funneled through virtual spaces now that we are in the context of a pandemic. At this point, I'm really going to lean into the fact that I was brought into the program, into the team, actually in a really specific capacity to hold the critical thinking, and almost sort of like, I realized the term panhandling this morning, which I think is really beautiful, because in that there are loads of minerals and really good stuff happening, but you have to be what you're looking for is a really select few set of minerals that could then really go on to influence what you want to do in the future. So I'm going to present a series of questions to Camille and Imwen, but as the audience, please, if there's anything that's come up so far from the talk, please feel free to put any questions and thoughts you have in the live chat, and I'll do my best to weave them into the conversation as it progresses. But firstly, to Camille, I really enjoyed kind of watching your thinking develop around this idea of decolonizing live illustration. I was just like really wondering what it was like for you to be part of the team, to sort of like have that embodied process and recognize what exactly was happening in that moment in time as the participants were speaking in the first council session?
Yeah, thanks, Will. Yeah, I'm really grateful actually for this experience, because I've learned so much already. I think in terms of decolonizing the live illustration practice, yeah, it's obviously essential now, and what I've started to kind of sketch is the idea that we need, as live illustrators, to give agency, but in a way that is not a smoke screen, you know, because a lot of people are talking at the moment about, you know, giving agency to the audience and so on. And, you know, it can start with very simple stuff. For example, with access to live illustration. In our second discussion, we actually gave people the choice to see the illustration or not. So we set up the canvas in a Zoom breaking room that people could access whenever they wanted, and they could have, you know, they could chat with me. And it's also about little things like, as live illustrator, we work a lot with visual metaphors and symbols. And really, we have to recognize that it's essential to research potential impacts, you know, and be open to change beliefs and thinking process, to also adapt our drawing pace. Like, we can make people feel uncomfortable if we draw at the same time they're talking, and maybe that's blocking their process, their thinking process. And obviously, welcoming criticism. So it's all about finding the right balance between the audience agency, but also your own creative spontaneity. Because as live illustrator, again, we work with free association, and we inject our own imagination is everything that's happening. So yeah, that's my finding so far.
Thanks, Camille. Yeah, I mean, that's like, that sounds like the beginning of a really, really fascinating journey. And I'll be honest with you, like, you're the first person I've ever heard refer to it that way. So that's what makes working on this kind of thing like really exciting for me. Imwen, I mean, where to start? Like the conversations we were having about having to effectively, we use the term kind of like break our own project wide open, recognizing the fact that if we were going to achieve anything of worth, we were going to have to deviate from the initial timeline we'd set for ourselves. What was that process like in real time for you, especially having to manage sort of like the ambitions of the project at large, specifically, but also having that computing happening whilst you're trying to hold a space for participants? Oh, we're on mute.
There we go. Okay. It was an interesting process, actually, because I'll be honest, sort of almost immediately, the moment we sort of sat down and actually, at the moment I sat down and actually started working out, you know, how many sessions we had, it was kind of like, there are so many different conversations to be had just in the council sessions alone, so the reality is that those council sessions, and our council sessions for us were really about trying to understand how we could develop that part of the process. So we were still in the discovery of how of our council sessions. So that could have just been our whole process in itself. So, you know, in our small groups, just beginning to understand it before we sort of picked that up and sort of tried it out on a larger scale. So for me, it was just, you know, it was almost apparent, but the reality is we are in the middle of delivering this project that we got funding for. So we have to move forward. And it was just about acknowledging we can do essentially sort of as much of it as we can. And then the next point, which became clear immediately, is that we need to apply for some funding to sort of expand this and deliver the next parts.
Thank you, Imwen. Yeah, I mean, it's again, like these kind of projects, they start off in a sort of like silo, and then the more you explore it, the more you realize you just need more room. Like, and it's about pushing against those walls almost.
Exactly. I'm used to a lot of my projects coming back with unexpected things. So in my mind, there was an area that, you know, things might change. And I think that a couple of the first conversations that we had sort of as a collective were be prepared for everything to be upended. But that's part of the process.
I love that. I love that. Camille, I think one thing that I became very aware of, especially because of like the intergenerationality of the council sessions, was how quickly the conversations could move from a space of almost like satire, you know, that kind of like jokey reflection on the realities and the capriciousness of like being Black and entering different virtual spaces where you effectively don't know what you're getting into until you see the gallery and you're like, oh, this is what's happening now. But then it'd move into points where people would reflect on those situations and share quite like hard-hitting stuff, stuff that they would have witnessed in a professional sense and stuff that they would have taken from a professional sense and would have carried home with them, which would have led for some quite difficult reflections. As bearing witness on that and trying to do it justice and share it in a way that was respectful, like how has that kind of influenced your thinking around live illustration moving forward, trying to scribe those difficult conversations?
Yeah, scribing difficult conversation is an interesting one. I think it's definitely starting by trying to convey the audience that your canvas as a live illustrator is a safe space, you know, behind that screen, because for the people who haven't experienced having a live illustrator on conversations on Zoom, nobody see really your face. You kind of camera is off and you have a canvas. So it's really to try and convey people that behind this canvas, there is someone with whom you can have a conversation, and whatever I draw, you know, is not engraved in stone. It's something that we can change and we can talk about it together, and I'm going to learn from what the audience tells me about it. So, and it's really a way where we keep the discussion going. We were talking about keeping the momentum going and so on. So, and it's also about, supporting the conversation's fluidity as how it happens, going from light to heavy subjects. And I think illustration, again, can help with that because it demystifies a lot of things that people sometimes might find hard to say with words. A drawing can replace 1,000 words. I don't know, it's a French saying, but I'm not sure how it translates in English. And I think the other thing is also, in our case, in Across the Room, is explaining very early on in the process to the audience that I'm drawing what people are saying, not what they look like or what I think they look like. You know, it's all about what they have to say. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, like, I couldn't do it, if I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I wouldn't know where to start. So, like, the care, I think, that you're doing that work with has been really informative for me in my practice, I'll be honest. Imwen, like, Takita mentioned actually how this kind of work has really, really affected her perception of design, specifically this idea of human-centered design. How would you like contextualize Across the Room, or specifically Ethno augmenting social realities, like in relationship to human-centered design?
Okay, so for me, starting this project, Ethno augmenting social realities, I just have to say this is not about human-centered design, but it is about a human approach. We're trying to interrogate a new process, and safety and care are embedded at its core, and that is the root. So human-centered design is widely used and it works, but it is an extractive process. The experts glean what they need through consultations to affirm ideas and existing assumptions. For us in this project, we want to develop a process that's based on what people actually want. And how do we do this? We do this by asking them and by interrogating human activity and look for indicators to really understand the barriers and the drivers for conversations in physical and digital spaces, and how to develop tools that might mediate that. And I think we need to be sort of explicit and clear that we're not here to develop tools. We are here to develop tools that facilitate, not to solve, because we don't have the answers and we can't have the answers. And actually there are too many conversations to be had. I hope that what we come up will have a playful element to it, but who knows, because it'll be indicated by the people. And those tools could be conceptual, they could be materials or resources, they could be physiological, they could be language-based. So for me, really, in this project, you know, what's next for us is it's open, because we are still very much in this place of learning and unknowing. So for us, forget about human-centered design. What we're really trying to understand now in interrogating our process is the how we can do this. And it's a really interesting space to be in, but it means for us as researchers, we're vulnerable because we don't get to present our findings in a neat, tidy bow at the end in a final event. It's all happening in real time, and that in real time with real people. And that does leave us open to criticism, but you have to be okay with that, because you have to take yourself back to the why. And it is a continual process of learning. It's like testing to make work. It's like game design. You play test, you iterate, you play test continually. But in doing that, you have to know that the information and insights that you're going to get are so, so useful. So yeah, I will stop there.
No, I love that response, because it speaks to one of the questions that have come through from the live chat, which was, is it too early to say how this work might influence your own future practice, or is it already influencing other projects? And I think it's speaking to the methods. Do you know what I mean? When I see that question, I love the fact that you said we have to accept the fact that it's open. And then you went on to speak about game design, and from my limited understanding of that world, I can't actually remember the last time. Sorry?
No, continue, sorry.
I was just going to say, I can't actually remember the last time I heard of a really big, cross-platform, multiplayer online game actually being finished now, because I'm constantly hearing about developers and games being developed even after their release. So I think there's something in there about like practice and best practice, and maybe these kind of projects being open-ended and it being necessary for them to remain as such.
I would agree. It's always, all my work is always influenced my practice, and I hope that my work, my research continues to always sort of influence my practice. I think for across the room team in general, the next stage of our process in this discovery would be sort of like interrogation on a larger scale. I think I said earlier, my motivation as a Black woman working in tech is that I want to see more Black voices included in the delivery, development and creation process. And I also want Black people to be happy in intercultural spaces, being ourselves, because I do think that they should be intercultural spaces. And I think ultimately, there isn't an end, but ultimately what I want to do is, let's say, put the pen firmly in the hand of participants. But before we get there, work is needed, let's say that.
Yeah, naturally. We've got like 5 minutes left of the lunchtime talk. Time seems to have flown from us. Like, Camille, do you already see yourself applying some of the learnings from across the room in projects that you're doing elsewhere as well? Is it happening in real time for you too?
Yeah, definitely. It's yeah, it really speaks volume, this question, because I don't know, it's I'm thinking about it, the council sessions and all the discussion we had as a collective. It's now whenever I'm scribing a discussion, I'm thinking about it. You know, I'm very conscious of all these things and of the need to decolonize my practice. And again, it's not only in things that are being drawn, it's in the way I present them, in the way I work with the team there and with the audience. So yeah, definitely. It's definitely happening in real time for me too.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like 2020 has kind of like circumstantially really amplified this conversation of best practice and humanistic practice as well. What with us carrying so much of our lives in spaces that in fact have to be multifaceted now, whereas a space used to serve one purpose. It's now serving several, and we've definitely experienced that in the work we've been doing at Rising Arts Agency this year, in recognizing that you can't effectively bang the drum for which transformation should be made to. You know, everyone's transformation happens on their own rhythm. So especially when you're trying to like create a safe space for people to come and explore things that would effectively open up new audiences to the creative tech sector. Creative tech sector it needs to slow down to ensure that these communities feel safe in the spaces to be authentic enough for the final product to really resonate with the audience that we're hoping, that you'd hope would want to take part in or make use of whatever product or tool it is you're designing and devising. So yeah, this kind of work, it really does feel like just the beginning, and it feels like it's coming at a really apt time, and it'll be amazing to learn more of the other projects on the Future Themes program, to see where there's intersectionality between those as well, and really understand at like sort of like a more broad stroke what exactly the PM Studio is up to right now. But yeah, at this point, I reckon it'd be best to hand over to Luke. Oh, we have one last question at the 11th hour. What have been your findings in creating? Okay, cool. In 2 words or in 1 sentence from both of you, what have been your findings in creating and holding safe space in a virtual way? What's like the first thing that comes to mind?
I think I said it earlier, read the room.
Yeah. Being open to conversation and to expose your own vulnerabilities as well. Be ready for that.
I love that. I think for me, my findings in creating and holding a safe space in a virtual way have been to respect the fact that there is more happening on the other side than the screen. So I really appreciate, now I'm finding I really appreciate where people are bringing their room sort of into the conversation. So the laptop or computer might be sat on a desk, but they're actually sat in a corner on a beanbag or on a bed or on a sofa or something, and they're eating some noodles and shouting at me because they can't be bothered to get up and sit at the desk. You know, I think that's something that's really exciting to explore. Thank you for that question. That was a great question. I'm going to hand back over to Luke now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. There's some real rich learning in there for all of us, and for those people who watch live and those who watch again. So it's really exciting to have kicked off with this one on the Future Theme season. Across the room, we'll be back following up on this talk with a blog post on our website. They'll offer you a bit more insight into what they've talked about today, so keep an eye out for that and subscribe to our newsletter to find out when that drops. Before we start next week's talk, before we finish rather, next week's talk is called Rabbit Holes and is by Ian Forrester, Penny Hay and James Cook. and they're going to talk about adaptive podcasting, what it is and how it might shape the future of listening. They'll explain the technology and talk about some of the creative challenges it offers and talk about a specific project they are working on to connect young audiences to the natural world. You can get news on all our future talks by following us on @PMStudio UK on Twitter or @Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram, or by subscribing to that newsletter on our website that I just mentioned. Don't forget, before you go, please hit subscribe on that button beneath this window and give the video a thumbs up. The more subscribers we get, the more likes we get, the more we can share stories like this. Please feel free to share the link now, as a captioned and recorded version of the video will be available to watch again shortly after we finish up. For now, thanks for watching, have a great weekend, and we'll see you all again, same time, same place next week.